Imagine a quiet diner, where an old man in a faded army jacket sits alone, every Thursday, ignored by everyone until a single moment changes it all. What happens when a waitress laughs at his war stories, and a Marine colonel walks in? Stay tuned, because this story will leave you speechless. Walter Dean walked in, slow, steady steps, the kind that came from a worn-out hip and too many cold mornings. His old army jacket hung loose around his frame, faded at the elbows. A small pin near the collar caught the light 3rd Infantry Division. No one looked up. No one said hello. He took his usual seat by the window, same table he'd sat at every Thursday for the past 8 years, ever since his wife passed. He folded his hands quietly on the table, waited. Across the counter, the waitress glanced his way. She was young, maybe early 20s, blonde ponytail, heavy eyeliner, name tag read Tina. She rolled her eyes. "Coffee?" she asked flatly, not moving. Walter nodded gently. "Yes, ma'am, that would be nice." She sighed, filled a mug, slapped it down a little harder than needed. "Anything else? Or just here for story time again?" Walter blinked. "Just coffee, thank you." Tina walked off, muttering to the cook. "He told me last week he helped rescue PS in Korea, week before that, Normandy dude can't even keep his fake wars straight." The cook didn't laugh, he just flipped a patty, kept his eyes on the grill. But a couple at the corner booth chuckled. One of them leaned in, whispered, "He always sits there, right? Like he's waiting to be noticed." Here's the question, what would you do if you saw someone being mocked for their service? Stick around, because in just 10 minutes, a Marine colonel will walk through that door and turn this diner upside down on graceful valor stories. Walter sat still. He took out an old, worn photo from his wallet, looked at it for a long time. 3 men in uniform stood beside him in the picture, one had his arm around Walter's shoulder. They were smiling, young, proud. Tina passed by again. "You know, you don't have to pretend, you could just order pancakes like everyone else." He looked up at her, not angry, just tired. "I'm not pretending," he said quietly. She scoffed, walked off. He stared back out the window, the photo still in his hand. Walter Dean had been coming to Evelyn's Diner every Thursday since 2015, not because the food was special, but because this was the last place he'd ever sat with his wife. They used to split a piece of apple pie right at this very table, same cracked vinyl seat, same window view. She used to smile, tell him, "You eat the crust, you always liked the crust." She was gone now, cancer. But he came anyway, because in a world that had changed too fast, some routines still mattered. He never made a fuss, never asked for a discount, just coffee, sometimes pie. He wore his old army jacket because it was warm, not because he wanted attention. And that pin near his collar, it wasn't for show, it came from Fort Stewart, Georgia, 3rd Infantry Division, he served there in 1959. Walter wasn't the kind of man to tell loud stories, he wasn't the kind to correct people either, even when they were wrong. But Tina, the waitress, didn't care much for quiet men, especially old ones. She laughed again from behind the counter. "Bet he says he was best friends with Eisenhower too." A few customers smiled. The sound of the spatula on the grill was the only thing that didn't join in. Walter just folded the photo back into his wallet, didn't even finish his coffee. He placed a $5 bill gently under the cup, reached for his cane. His hand shook slightly, not from weakness, but from years of holding tools, bolts, and broken parts steady in places too hot, too loud, or too close to danger. He stood slowly, his back hunched with time, not shame, and still, no one moved, no one helped. The door let out a soft ding as it opened again, cold air drifted in. Someone stepped inside, heavy boots, a calm, slow stride. But Walter didn't turn around, he just lowered his head slightly, adjusted the pin on his jacket, as if making sure it still belonged there. The diner wasn't busy that morning, a few regulars, a trucker near the back, a mother with her son eating pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. The boy, maybe 7 or 8, had been watching Walter quietly, not with fear, but curiosity. He slid out of his booth, walked up, small sneakers scuffing the tile. "Were you really in the army?" he asked softly. Walter looked at him, surprised, gave a small nod, a kind smile. "A long time ago," he said. The boy nodded back. My grandpa was too, he had medals. Do you got medals? Walter reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was a faded bronze star. The boy's eyes went wide. Before he could say more, the mother hurried over, grabbed his shoulder. Come on, don't bother the man, she said sharply, go sit down. She offered Walter an awkward half-smile, like an apology she didn't really mean, then pulled her son back to their booth. Tina was watching it all from behind the counter. She walked by again, setting down a new pot of coffee. Showing off your little coin again? She said with a smirk. You know you can buy those online. Walter didn't answer, he just tucked the medal away, quietly turned his gaze back to the window. Behind him, someone at the counter said under their breath, I mean, who comes here just to get attention? Walter gripped his cane, tried to stand again, but this time his leg gave slightly, he had to catch himself on the table. The chair scraped the floor loud enough to turn a few heads, but no one got up. He steadied himself, took a breath, reached into his pocket, left another crumpled $5 bill beneath his unfinished mug. He turned toward the door, moving slowly, each step a quiet battle between balance and dignity. And then, before he reached the exit, the bell rang, a tall figure stepped through. No one knew who he was, but the way he stood, it changed the air in the room. The man who stepped through the door didn't look around like most folks did, he walked with purpose, tall, broad-shouldered, pressed Marine Corps dress uniform, rows of ribbons on his chest, silver eagles on each collar, a full bird colonel. The diner fell quiet, even the cook stopped flipping eggs, the laughter died mid-breath. The colonel's eyes scanned the room once, then they stopped on Walter. The old man had just reached the door, one hand gripping his cane, the other holding onto the frame. The two men locked eyes. The colonel walked forward slowly, not rushed, not stiff, with the kind of walk that said, I'd been in rooms where life and death were decided. He stopped just in front of Walter, stood tall, and without saying a word, he removed his hat, held it to his chest. People watched, no one moved, even Tina stayed frozen, her hand still on the coffee pot. Sergeant Walter Dean, the colonel said, voice deep, respectful. Walter blinked, his voice was quiet. Yes, sir. The colonel nodded once. I've waited a long time to meet you. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small navy blue box, held it carefully, like it meant something. Your name came up often, the colonel said, at Quantico, Fort Bragg, and again last year at a reunion I almost didn't attend. Walter looked confused. I don't think you wouldn't remember me, the colonel said gently, but the man who trained me spoke about you often, called you the best mechanic under fire he ever served with, said you fixed his truck during an ambush in '68, got his unit out before the medevac arrived. Walter's mouth parted slightly, he didn't speak. The colonel extended the box. His name was Captain Dale Mercer, he died 2 years ago, but he wanted this delivered if we ever found you. Walter took the box with both hands, quiet, careful. Inside was a polished coin, a folded letter. Walter stared down at it, hands shaking, not from age this time, but something else, memory. Walter didn't say anything, his hands rested on the small box like it was made of glass. The letter inside was handwritten, folded carefully, on the outside in faded blue ink, for Walter, if he's still out there. The colonel stepped back slightly, still holding his hat, gave a single sharp nod, the kind only soldiers understand. I wanted you to know, he said, voice lower now, he didn't forget, none of them did. Walter opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came, just a breath, a slow blink, then a small, grateful nod. Across the diner, silence held. The same people who chuckled earlier now stared without a word, even Tina, still holding the coffee pot, looked down, like she suddenly saw the man, not just the wrinkles. The child from earlier tugged his mother's sleeve. Mom, is he a hero? She didn't answer right away, then softly said, yes, I think he is. The colonel placed a hand on Walter's shoulder, firm, but not heavy. I'm heading back to base, he said, but I couldn't leave town without doing this. Walter finally found his voice worn, but steady. I didn't do much, I just fixed things. The colonel shook his head. No, sir, you kept people alive, that's never just. And then, from the back booth, the cook stepped out from behind the counter, still wearing his apron, he clapped once, then again. A second later, someone else joined in, and another. It wasn't loud, it wasn't forced, but it filled the room with something that had been missing since Walter walked in. Respect. The colonel gave one last nod, turned, walked out, boots steady on the tile, hat still in his hand. Walter sat down again, slowly this time, placed the box beside his coffee. His hands shook, but now from the weight of memory, not shame. And Tina, she poured him a fresh cup, didn't say a word, just placed it gently on the table, walked away. Walter sat with the fresh cup of coffee in front of him. He didn't drink it, not yet. His eyes stayed on the small box, the folded letter, the memory it carried. The diner had settled into a strange quiet, not awkward, not anymore, just still, like people weren't sure what to say, but finally understood why they should have said it earlier. He opened the box again, slower this time, took out the letter, unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, probably written from a hospital bed. If someone finds this before I go, give it to Walter Dean. He saved a unit of 14, me included, in the middle of a firefight under a smoking engine. He didn't ask for thanks, just handed me the keys, said, try not to stall her. Walter smiled softly at that line. He remembered saying it, didn't think anyone would. The letter continued, men like him don't get statues, they get forgotten, but I didn't forget, we owe him more than he'll ever admit. Sincerely, Walter Dale. Walter folded the letter carefully, put it back in the box. Across the diner, Tina stood by the coffee machine, arms crossed, eyes lowered. She looked different now, no makeup or apron could cover guilt. She walked over slowly, refilled the sugar jar without a word, then paused. I didn't know, she said. Walter looked up at her. I didn't expect you to. She hesitated. Was it hard? He thought for a moment, then said, some parts, others, you just get through. Tina nodded, walked away, not fast, just quiet. At the next table, the boy who'd asked about medals earlier looked back over. His pancakes were cold, but he didn't care. Is that your friend's letter? He asked. Walter nodded. Did you save his life? Walter took a breath. I was just doing my job. The boy smiled. My grandpa would have liked you. Walter smiled back. I would have liked him too. The mood in the diner had shifted. The laughter wasn't gone, but it was different now, not mocking, not cruel, just quieter, more careful. Walter stayed seated at his usual table, this time, not just another face in the corner. Now, people glanced his way not with suspicion, but recognition. A man in a postal jacket walked over. I don't know if this means much, but my father served too, Korea. You reminded me of him today. He reached out, shook Walter's hand. Walter stood for it, steadying himself on his cane. Thank you, he said simply, because sometimes simple is enough. More came, not in a rush, not dramatic. A school teacher who had seen him walking the neighborhood for years but never spoken, a trucker who said nothing, just nodded, placed a folded $20 bill beside Walter's coffee. And the boy, the one with the cold pancakes, he returned with a notepad. Can I write down one of your stories? He asked, for school? Walter chuckled softly. Most of my stories are just busted engines and muddy boots. I like those, the boy said, they sound real. So Walter told him one, about a night in Germany when he fixed a Jeep with a spoon because the wrench had snapped. The boy laughed, scribbled it down with real focus. Walter hadn't felt useful in a long time. That changed today. The colonel never returned. He didn't need to. The message had been delivered, and the weight it left behind had done more than a speech ever could. Tina brought over a slice of apple pie. She didn't charge him, just placed it down, quietly said, for her. Walter looked up, surprised. I saw the photo in your wallet once, she added. She looked kind. She was, he said. He took a bite slowly. It tasted just like memory. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a burden in the room. He felt seen. The sun was setting by the time Walter stepped out of the diner. The sky glowed soft orange, the kind his wife used to say looked painted by angels. He walked slowly down Main Street, cane tapping gently against the sidewalk. The box with the letter was tucked safely in his coat, not to show off, but because some things are worth carrying close. As he passed the town square, something caught his eye, a mural painted on the side of the old library. He'd passed it a dozen times, never really stopped, but today, he did. It showed a soldier, not in battle, not with medals, just an older man in uniform holding a child's hand, no name, no plaque, just dignity. Walter stood in front of it for a long time, long enough for the street lights to blink on. A woman walking her dog paused nearby. "That's new," she said, noticing him watching it. "Kids from the school painted it, said it's for the veterans no one talks about." Walter gave a quiet nod. He didn't need to tell her it looked familiar, didn't need to say thank you, some things speak for themselves. He turned, walked home, slower now, but not heavy, not this time. That night, Walter placed the folded letter in a drawer beside his wife's photo. He didn't cry, he just looked at it a moment longer than usual, then turned off the lamp. If you believe some stories don't need to be shouted to matter, subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories for more voices like Walter's, and if this one stayed with you, comment honor below, because quiet respect still means something.